This is our Mundo Voices. She's the woman behind Telemundo and Latin America's operations and technology, a 2016 inductee to the Sports Broadcasting Hall of Fame, an advocate for STEAM education, and the secretary for the Young Ambassadors Leadership Academy. She's Andrea Berry, and today we're bringing her to the pod. Andrea, bienvenida. Welcome to our Mundo Voices.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. I'm really looking forward to this discussion.
Oh, we're looking forward to it ourselves. We're really excited to have you here to talk to us a little bit about your journey, how you've changed the game in the industry. And I know you're a busy woman, so we'll get right into it. Let's start with talking about the game. Mm-hmm. So there's a stat that says that 94% of top-level female executives have played a sport in the past. Moment of truth. Which sport did you play so that we can all start playing that?
I swam.
Wow.
I was a swimmer in high school, and in college, I did my first year in college, I swam, but then I got super busy with all kinds of other things, and you'll find out what those are as we talk. But I'm a swimmer. I still swim. I love swimming. I love the water. So maybe I fall into that statistic.
That's amazing. So it definitely sounds like we're hitting up that pool this summer. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think the other sport you didn't mention that you do on the daily, by the way, is live television.
Yes. And that's I don't know. It's not a sport. It's my high. It's my passion.
That's a good one.
So I've been doing live television all my adult life, literally. And it's probably the most fun thing I do as far as career is live TV.
That's awesome. So on that note, we're coming off of Black History Month, now welcoming Women's History Month. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to us a little bit about your journey to leadership in O&T? How did you, as an African-American woman, change the game in an industry that wasn't traditionally game for you?
Well, I started off I started off as a teenager, literally, after my freshman year in college. And NBC, ironically enough, a local station in Chicago came and recruited us at our engineering school. I was studying engineering, computer science, and they were looking for technology students to be on the technical side behind the scenes at the station. And I just did the interview because my dad told me to practice my interviewing skills because I had none, right? And so I ended up getting the job right after my freshman year, and really, literally, that paid for my college education because I kept going back, and I also got the bug of the entertainment industry. In college, I also had my own radio station, my own radio program at the station on campus, and we also broadcasted classes to the neighboring corporate entities whose employees wanted to take classes right after work. So we had the students, we were doing live transmission, we were operating the robotic cameras, we were doing all this stuff, and little did I know that this would be my direction in life. I totally fell into it because it wasn't in the plan at the point.
What was your experience like being one of the few women in this industry?
Everything from exciting to lonely to constantly being second-guessed. The most positive thing that I've felt right now in this day and age is that there are a lot more women doing operations and technology in the television realm. It was an old boys network for a long time, very nepotistic. It was, you're looked upon differently all the time. So, and I had the double whammy of being not only African American, but also a woman. And so I had to shield myself and realize that I'm representing a lot here, and I have to really probably do more and do extra in order to stay in the game. And I didn't want to make the mistakes, and I knew that I wasn't going to be allowed to make certain mistakes that the guys made, and because then that would label women
differently
and Black people differently than they were for the average white male who I was surrounded by. So it was always in my conscious. I was always every day reminded that I was African American and a woman, but it was more me reminding myself, not that anybody, infiltrated that thought to me. It was me being very conscious of that. And so, after a while, though, I can tell you the relationships that I built were very strong. I remember when Rodney King was attacked by the cops, and I was doing a show in Los Angeles, and it was, it was after the Rodney King attacks, and we had a basketball game to do in downtown in L.A. I believe it was at the Coliseum or in that area, USC game. And the white males came to me and said, wow, this is an incredible thing, because that was the first time we'd ever seen anything on television where someone was being beaten by cops. And they were very compassionate because they wondered, first of all, I was the only African-American person on the crew, but they were very passionate and sympathetic. And they said, you know what, I guess we will never understand what it takes to be a black man in America. And I said, neither will I. I'm surrounded by it, but I am not affected. I am affected by it. It was a horrible incident, but they realized that incident affected me because it was hurtful to see that. But they didn't realize that how bad it was, because they knew that they would never be in that situation. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it was, it's hard to even describe it now because I'm getting chills on how much sympathy came to me as a black woman.
What a story.
Yeah.
What a story. It's,
yeah.
It's so beautiful to see what empathy can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Going deeper into who you are, Andrea, where you come from, what is something you feel you've taken from your Black heritage and the women in your life that you still use to this day?
My mom always told me, my mother and father were both scientists, and they were unusual. They stressed education for all of us. We're three siblings, and they taught us how to be very proud of who we are. And we were taught African-American history. My mother was also an educator. Well, we were taught African-American history and my West Indian history because I'm part Jamaican. We were taught that in the house. So it was a lot of storytelling about who we were and how we should be proud of who we are, and how your cultural knowledge and intelligence about your culture really shapes who you are and where you can be. And African-American people in this country have been very resilient. Our history has forced us to be very resilient. We're a creative people. And I think that, what my mom did teach us is that people are people, and you have to excel. And because people are going to always look at you differently. It's almost like she would tell us point blank, you have to be twice as good in order to get half. And that's
deep.
It was deep for you to tell that to somebody like in middle school, high school. You have to do twice as good in order to get what another person has.
And how do you even process that at such a young age?
You just do well in school. They encouraged education. I was always taught to be very proud of, we had different types of music in the house. It's not unusual thinking back now for me to be in the entertainment industry because I was surrounded by music, surrounded by exposure to theater and museums and all that. So my family always stressed our culture.
I love that. Very powerful.
Yeah.
As you were sharing your story, I was reflecting on something I've taken away from my heritage and my mother as well. And that's got to be just this concept of grace.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, my mom, she's been very big about instilling in my sister and I the importance of investing your energy, not just wasting it, right? Picking your battles.
Yeah.
And really fighting the ones that you're really passionate about, the ones that matter the most, right? At least for me, that's when the Latina comes out. That's when that sí se puede, vamos con todo hustler mentality comes out.
Yeah. And it's no different in the African American.
Absolutely. I think all women have this in them. But, I think it's so uniquely beautiful to see how the intersectionality of your culture and your circle come together to bring out the best of you. I think there's nothing that can equate to that.
Yeah. And your spiritual beliefs, all those things come out. And my mom taught me, and I do this to this day. I had to be about 8 years old. Was how to vision We call it vision boarding. Back then, we called it treasure mapping. And we used to cut out things out of a magazine and put it on a poster board and pray on it every night and everything. And when I saw that those things came true, I was like, wow. And so every step of the way throughout my life, I've either written down my goals or written down aspirations or made affirmations. And those things really put your subconscious into this goal-setting mode, and it drives you.
Absolutely. Well, you touched on it already. Let's talk about 8-year-old Andrea, because I know you channel her every once in a while deep down there. So growing up, did you ever imagine you'd become a pioneer in our industry? Can you talk to us about your childhood dreams and how they manifested or evolved over time?
Wow. Great question. Honestly, I wanted to be an architect and interior designer.
Wow.
I was really good in math, and I loved art. I could draw and paint and do all those things, and then I was good on the math side of it. So I actually wanted to enter college and do architecture. And the university I went to actually has an excellent architecture program. So I was just right on the path. And then when I was the summer before freshman year, my dad talked me out of it, and he says, "You know what? You should really try engineering. There's not a lot of women in this." And I think he was trying to live vicariously through me because my dad was a physicist. And he talked me into becoming, studying engineering. And I ended up doing engineering computer science. So I know that when I was younger, I wanted to do the architecture. But the little girl in me, honestly, I remember when I was about 11 or 12, we had gone to a television studio for something. I think it might have been a field trip or something. And I saw the camera guys there, and I was like, wow, that would be secretly. You know how you have those secret girl thoughts? I was like, wow, that would be really cool if I could run the cameras and be in a television studio and work. And I never thought about it again. It was one of those fleeting
One of
thoughts.
those passive thoughts.
Yeah. And so I go back to the visioning. Like, you probably put that out in the universe, and the answer was what happened, because 4 or 5 years later, when I was 18, here I am doing live television in a studio, as a camera person.
I wanted to ask you this as well. Was there ever a time where you thought the very things would hinder you actually became your biggest strengths, or they actually worked in your favor?
Yeah. I think, and you learn how to play with it. I was a woman out there, and I knew that was, some people detested it. I remember when I went back from New York to Chicago and was working at the local station in Chicago, and I got the job as the director of technical operations, and one of the guys who had been passed over for the job, he quit.
Wow.
He didn't want to report to a woman, and he just quit, out and out quit the job. And that kind of scared me, because I'm like, if he did it, how many other guys are doing this or don't want to work with me because I'm a woman, or because I'm African American? Because you still got to think of those two things, right? Yeah. And there probably were a lot of them who tried to take advantage of me during that time or talk behind my back and saying awful things about being a woman. And then I realized that, you know what? This is all you're going to be for the rest of your life. You're never going to be anything different. So how can you craft your management style and who you are as a person? Because my ultimate goal is to put a product on the air, right? And I have to build strong teams. So how can I use who I am as a woman in order to build strong teams?
Yeah, that's deep. I think this is one of the most fascinating questions. I'm always fascinated by this, because it's crazy how sometimes some of our biggest insecurities end up becoming our biggest strengths.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? And it's funny because I was talking about this with some of my coworkers the other day. I remember when I first started my career here in corporate America, straight out of college, one of my biggest insecurities, forget being a woman, it was being the youngest person in the team.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah, that was scary. That was scary because I remember thinking to myself, am I going to be taken seriously? I'm like the most inexperienced person here.
Right.
Are my college baked ideas going to be too millennial for a corporate environment at that time? And it wasn't until after that I realized those college baked ideas, that fresh energy, that was what I was bringing to the table at that phase in my career.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that became a full circle moment for me when I became a people manager. And I started managing my own interns and my own direct reports that were early career professionals, and just seeing how much I was learning from them the same way that they were learning from me. I mean, I'm learning TikTok strategies. I'm learning about Chat GPT and all these other AI technologies I'm certain I'm going to learn about later. But it's such a full circle moment because I think that's when it becomes a testament how every single strand of diversity is so important in building stronger teams.
Absolutely. And I've had a lot of mentees. I've had great mentors, but I've had some really amazing mentees who are doing very well in their careers right now. And I can tell you periodically I call them and, hey, what's going on? And I feel as if I've failed if I haven't learned from them.
Absolutely. Some good tips right there. And Andrea, shifting gears a bit, I wanted to talk a little bit about words of affirmation. This is something that you touched upon earlier in the conversation. And one of the biggest themes of this year's Women's History campaign is to reroute all of these negative thoughts that are ingrained in our brains as women and turn them into positive thoughts or words of affirmation. So with that, real talk, what negative thoughts would go through your mind or even continue to go through your mind as you go along your journey? And how do you counter those?
Sometimes self-doubt,
Does that ever really go away?
I don't know. I think you have to shift self-doubt and say, okay, why do I doubt myself? Why do I not believe in my own intuition, right? Because sometimes your gut tells you more than your head does.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, and so I have had to take that self-doubt sometimes and turn it around and realize that, you know what, if you're doubting something, there must be something about that. And you have to really analyze what it is. And then if it's because you don't understand something, go learn it. Go figure it out. And so I think the shift is accepting that self-doubt. Try to listen to your first intuition because usually that's right.
Absolutely. It's funny because we actually posed this very question to all women across Telemundo Center via Yammer in celebration of Women's History. And we received a great amount of inspiring quotes of affirmation. But the common thread that I found so interesting about these is that many of them focused on this concept of being enough. Being strong, being confident. And I was thinking to myself, what's causing this to be the word of affirmation that you have to say to yourself every day? And to your point, I thought to myself, you know how hard it is to be a woman. There's so much pressure with being a woman. I mean, you're a mom, you're a caregiver, you're a wife, you're a leader, you're a contributor, you're a best friend.
Yeah.
And our nature is to be nurturing.
That's right.
When we care a whole lot.
That's right.
When we give a whole lot. So there's this innate pressure in our mind that we have to be 100% in every single role, every single day of our lives.
Absolutely.
It's exhausting.
And what's even more exhausting is when you see your counterpart, your colleague who may be a male, and they're not as qualified as you, they're not as well educated as you, and they're not as competent as you. And they're okay with it. Women, sometimes we figure we have to have a PhD in everything. And that's not true because in most cases, you're learning on your job. You got the job because you were prepared and you were qualified, right, to a point. But really the actual job, you're learning on the job for a while, and so you have to allow for that. in your mind. You have to allow for making mistakes and learning and seeking help. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
I think that's absolutely. I think building a community is so important, especially when you're taking so many roles. And I go back to this concept of grace, right? Understanding that you're not going to be 100% of everything to everyone all the time. That's okay.
Right.
There's going to be different trade-offs in different phases of your life. That's okay as well. And I think when we learn to dominate and accept this, I think that's when maybe we'll start seeing these words of affirmation evolve from I am enough to soy mujer. That is my superpower.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what I'm manifesting this Women's Month.
Yeah. And you know what? It's funny because we're always told to do that, but to spend the time and do it. I mean, I wish for Women's Month we would advocate more on loving ourselves and appreciating who we are.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you there. And Andrea, clearly your words of affirmation have worked because you're definitely at a high level here and running the show. So now with a decades-long career under your belt and recently coming off the FIFA World Cup Qatar, can you give us a sneak peek on how your team is preparing for the Women's World Cup this year?
Yeah, well, no matter what a budget is, budgetary differences, economic differences in shows, because the Women's World Cup is quite different from the men's on that aspect, my team still has to produce a stellar product. We still have to have 100% on the air. And so we encourage that. We did a lot of all of our control stations, if you will, were here. Control rooms were here for the Men's World Cup. So we actually mastered what we call a Remy-style production for sports. We mastered that for the World Cup. And I'm so tremendously proud because we had, multiple games that were flawless. We worked really well with the sports department, and it was just awesome. I mean, I can't even express how proud I am of our teams. And so the Women's World Cup, we're going in with the same type of vigor. Even though the productions will be scaled down, it's still going to have that same type of vigor and pride.
Well, let me tell you, we're all excited to see us bring our best game to that field. The Women's World Cup comes to Telemundo and Peacock July 20th to August 20th. Australia, New Zealand, here we come. And all I have to say is, if USA wins, we're calling up Miley because it's a party again in the USA and Telemundo Center. What do you have to say about that?
Well, we hope so. We hope so. I remember when I first got the phone call. I had just been at Telemundo not even a month, I don't think, and I got the call from Los Angeles saying, hey, we would like to do the Miley Cyrus New Year's Eve show at the Telemundo Center. And I said, this year?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah. And we had about less than a month to prepare for that.
So, Andrea, now with all of this experience under your belt, what would you recommend to those that come after you and how to change the game?
Be fearless. Don't take no for an answer. A lot of times when I wanted to do something throughout my career, and it would take us all day to talk about that, I was told no at first, and I simply would ask, why not? What do I have to do to get what I'm asking for? It could have been a great show assignment. It could have been a promotion or whatever. Prepare yourself and be prepared to do that. Embrace failing. Because failure is, I don't even like that word. It's more of a challenge. Embrace it because it's going to be that teaching moment. I don't think that we're presented with challenges unless we're prepared to take them on.
Well said. What a game plan. Andrea, thank you so much for being with us here today and for sharing a piece of your unstoppable journey. For all of our listeners out there, let us know your thoughts on this episode in the comments. Happy Women's Month y hasta la próxima.
Thank you.